I'm struggling. Okay, so story time. About a year ago, towards the end of the summer, kind of around this time of year, we had just finished our work day typically, so like it's kind of the evening or whatever on a Friday. And nice day out, super warm out, and our cat starts flying around the room like with the greatest of ease. And I just chalked it up to the typical like cat zoomies that come out of nowhere. And so she's gracefully gliding through the air, chasing something. I just assume it's a fly. But she's kind of like knocking over stuff. So this is kind of unusual for her because she's kind of an older cat. So our initial instinct is like, dude, cat, knock it off, because like we have a little 2-year-old. She's like trying to relax. And next thing I know is I'm like, I noticed that this is not just a fly. You can just kind of tell it's a pretty big insect. And that's when I noticed it was actually a wasp, hornet. And if you know anything about those things, is they are not ideal to have around a little kid, particularly a toddler who likes to touch and poke and crawl and move. And so, you know, I was just like, oh, good job, cat. That's awesome. Well done. Protecting the house. And at the same time, my dog is like trying to eat the one that had knocked down. I'm just like, dude, no, it's going to sting you. So kind of cleared out the area. Of course, it's Friday in the evening and no one's available. You know, the typical the big companies like or any of those big names, they were basically just that nonsense automated number that you can't get through to anybody. At least I couldn't. So I'm like going through just like Google, basically like finding like local people who do that sort of thing. And I got a hold of this one guy who actually picked up. This guy calls me back after I left a message. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't tell you, thank you so much for calling me back. Like nobody's calling me back. And it was just such a huge relief. So he was super friendly. Like, I wish I knew I'll have to find out what the guy's name was and who he is, but just an absolute class act. And what was cool was he came by, he kind of like educated me a little bit about like why wasps typically will like kind of get kind of crazy towards the end of the year or towards the end of the season. And it's really just because it kind of comes down to just like the food source is kind of drying up. So they get a little bit more desperate, they get a little bit more aggressive. And so he kind of told me about that and why that is, and like how our house specifically, it's a craftsman house, and it has like these large eaves at the top all around the house. It looks nice, but unfortunately it's also like a great shelter for bugs. And so these wasps had found their way into the top crest of the eave above our family room. But then they realized, hey, there's more space back here. And so they crawled through the crack of the crest and proceeded to essentially expand their footprint. So they were going basically behind our drywall into our insulation. So as they started to kind of like expand into the up behind our ceiling, they're like, hey, something's down there, we can hear it. And so they started to kind of tunnel down into our ceiling under our drywall. And that's what was happening whenever we came home on that Friday, that fateful afternoon, was they had basically like burrowed through the drywall and they were dropping out one at a time. Now, whenever we had our cat freaking out, that was one wasp that was flying around. We killed it, no problem. And I'm like, well, let's just like open the window blinds just to be sure there's no more flying around. And I opened those blinds, man, and there was like 30 wasps on the window. So I saw those like amount of wasps on my window freaking out, and I'm like, holy crap, like we gotta do something about this. So anyway, I killed them all. I got the guy on the phone, he's on his way. And I start to notice like there's even more. Like after I killed them all, there's more flying around. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? I just killed you all. What's going on? And I just happened to just look up at the right time where I'm like, what's that on the ceiling? And it's like this little dark hole. And I'm like, what is that? And as I'm looking, I see something kind of wiggling its way out, like it's being born. And it's a wasp. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then right behind him was another and another. It's just, that's like a horror story. Like you have a toddler, you're your new dad. Like it's just like, it's just the last thing I wanted to deal with. But I took like a little piece of plastic Tupperware and I used painter's tape to hold it to the ceiling. And I had filled it with like that wasp killer spray stuff. And so I use painter's tape because I don't want the ceiling to be ripped apart when I pull it down. So I like put it in place over top of the hole, and like I could see them slowly but surely, like, each one dropping down into the actual like the killer fluid stuff that I had. And then what I ended up doing was, and they all died every time, so I was like super glad that I thought to do that instead of just letting them fly out every time as I was waiting for the guy. So he gets there and he sees that, he's like, that was a good idea. I'm like, yeah, thanks, man. So if you're ever in a situation where you got to wait for an exterminator guy to show up and there's like wasps flying out of your ceiling, that is a valid way to go about it. So a piece of plastic Tupperware, painter's tape, killer wasp spray, and just let it ride. So anyway, he's there. He gets there. He drills a little bit bigger of a hole, and then he sprays this wasp killer stuff that was like, it had to be like industrial grade for like, I don't know, some ancient Chinese murder wasps or whatever. Anyway, so he kills these things with like this spray. At least he gets the majority of them. And then he sprays this powder up there. So as he sprays this powder up there, it'll adhere to their bodies, their carapace, and that kills them. Every time they flap their wings, they kind of kick it up into the air and it attaches to their buddies, basically. So like it's kind of like a no-fly zone for wasps. But regardless, so after like I waited a couple days or whatever, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna patch this up with some SPAKL. I'm gonna paint it. It'll be fine. And I did, and it looked great. And after a day or two, I'm like, what the heck's going on up there? And I look up, and the ceiling is kind of like getting greasy. I guess there's like the stuff he uses like crazy greasy, and it started like kind of like seep through the paint I had just put on there. So I'm like, oh my gosh, are you serious? That's so frustrating because like you got to pull out the ladder, you got to SPAKL, you got to paint, you got to wait, you got to paint. It's just a whole thing. Also with a toddler, it's just like, it's not a great time. And so with I had to use the app because I was like, I don't really know exactly how to fix that. I'm sure like if I use like some sort of like, I don't know, semi-gloss or gloss and then paint over that, I don't really know. So I use SPAKL, and it's talking about using basically like stain-proof primer. And so we're going to pick out some of that and see how that goes. But that was the story, yeah. So like crazy wasps in my house on Friday evening. Not the best. And it's also one of those things, I know this has been needing to be done for some time. And every time I kind of look, and it's like we have vaulted ceilings. And so like you don't always see it, but like if you're sitting down watching TV, which we don't do frequently, but when you are, I can't help but like kind of like look up and I'll see it. I'm like, ugh, I gotta do something about that. It's kind of like that Phil Dunphy from like Modern Family where he's like, I gotta do something about that step.
For your information, your son is hard at work on an awesome Van Gogh. You gotta fix that masterpiece.
And it's like, whatever, 8-10 seasons later, he doesn't do anything about it. But it's kind of like that, where it's like, you gotta do it. You're gonna do it. And today I'm doing it. So we'll see how this goes.